Well, let's talk about a little bit now. You got to premise this by this is not individual legal guidance. People would really, each case is different. But for
Absolutely.
those new attorneys who are getting this, like when you get the call from someone brand new, fresh, and says, "Listen, ICE contacted us. What do we do when we get that phone call? What's the first reaction you should have?"
Well, of course, when they contacted you, they've either delivered the notice of inspection, and these days it's with a subpoena, or some of the offices do it by FedEx.
Hmm.
So of course you want to get a copy of that, within 30 minutes after you talk to this new client. So you can see, who to contact to get an extension. See, well, or see if they did give you only 3 days. Some of the times when they do it by FedEx, they do give you like 14 days. And you don't need an extension, but that's really your first mode. To first action is you got to make sure you know when are these documents going to be due. And Second is you really need to get to the employer, whether the employer is in your town or in another town. Now, it's really it's a lot easier to do if if you actually can go to the facility.
Hmm.
Uh, and that sometimes means, picking up at a moment's notice to get to that facility. Now, during COVID, it's been a little tougher. And So, we've been doing them, meeting with the clients and looking at I-9s through Zoom, through,
Yeah.
scanning and emailing the I-9s to me. I mean, and, some of them were, I mean, the second to the last one I had um, was in Hawaii, and wasn't exactly practical, even if it wasn't COVID times, to
Yeah.
get out there. And my company was a construction company, and their project was winding down, so there really wasn't anybody to go out there to talk to. So what you want to do is you got to train whoever your HR are, or whoever is involved, so that you can help them look for errors. I mean, I do most of it. Kind of depends on how big the client is. I mean,
Hmm.
some of my clients have only been 10 employees, 20 employees, 30, but then I've got some that are hundreds of employees. I had one out in San Francisco back last year during COVID, and it was hundreds and hundreds of employees. Luckily, we had a decent amount of time. And so I went through a lot of I-9s looking for errors. Um, what you're hoping to do is remediate, correct the errors, especially what they call substantive errors. Um, Now you have to be a little careful as to how to do it. Of course, you as the attorney can't do it because you're not the one who wrote on the I-9. So you have the employee or the HR representative of the company. Um, if you're out of Chicago, they like to do it they're sort of funky about it. They tell you can't touch the original I-9. So last time I said, okay, I can't touch it. That doesn't mean I can't attach a new I-9 and make
Hmm.
all the corrections and then attach the old I-9 to it. Now, so far, unfortunately, that hasn't had a lot of success with the Chicago office. They seem to be a little more difficult than others, but I'm hopeful that they'll come around.
Is
Uh,
it in other offices where you write on the side with the date that you made the correction? Is that the proper procedure?
Proper procedure is to make the correction. So, say you left out the expiration date of a document, you would
Hmm.
add that in, initial it, date it, and that's the correction. If the employee left off something, say they never checked off the right box for their status, they
Hmm.
didn't check they were a permanent resident, write their A number in there, then they would do that, initial it, and date it. So,
Yeah, I
um,
was under the impression that's the correct method, but Chicago doesn't accept that.
well, there are offices that say once the subpoena has been delivered to you or the notice of inspection,
No one changes
they're not
that.
going to accept
Okay.
any corrections. And the Chicago case, I have to say, is a little there's some unusual aspects of it. I'll
I
just put
see.
it that way.
Well,
Atlanta has been difficult to get those for them to accept that. It seems to sometimes they don't. So, but every other office And I've dealt with, Charlotte, Jacksonville, Orlando, Miami, New Orleans, Little Rock, Memphis, all over. Now, even with that, sometimes there's things you can't correct. I mean, if
Yeah.
it was untimely done, that's going to be a substantive error for the employer not getting it done in time. Then you're gonna, that's going to be a problem, and you're going to have to, um, you're probably going to face substantive penalties, um, unless they're not that many, and then they go, hey, you know what, you did a good job.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a warning notice. I mean, and sometimes you get the biggest break around. I mean, I had a Chinese restaurant that, I mean, they didn't have the I-9s at all when they were the notice of inspection out in Arkansas, and I told him right up front. I said, we're going to do everything we can. We're going to get all I-9s done for the first time. We're going to submit them, but they're all late. So they're, you're gonna. But luckily, you only got like eight employees. So $2,000 a pop. You're going to look at about a $15,000 fine.
Yeah.
I dealt with the auditor a lot in Little Rock, and for whatever reason, he basically said, well, Mr. Buchanan, I appreciate that they hired you. You got them straight. You've trained them. These I-9s are perfect now. We're just going to overlook the fact that they were
Wow.
done after the fact, and they got a warning notice. And
Wow.
the clients that get warning notices. I once had a client in Miami that they wanted it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they wanted to run down to the ICE office and pick it up that afternoon. And the guy goes, well, I'm gonna be leaving at 4:15. I think I can make it. And the guy goes, no, just come in the morning. It'll be okay. So, now unfortunately for some companies, they make a big mistake. They don't hire either an attorney, or they don't hire an immigration compliance attorney.
Yeah.
It's really, quite frankly, hiring an immigration attorney who doesn't know anything about compliance. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's better than hiring, Joe Schmo off the street attorney, but still, it's not, it can be problems. And I had a client down in, well, they weren't my client until they hired me, but down in Florida. And, I was contacted about 2 summers ago, maybe 3 summers ago. And they had gotten proposed what's called a notice of intent to fine for $767,000. Now,
Yeah.
they told me up front they could afford to pay it. They were a medium-sized construction company, but they said, we don't want to.
Of
Like,
course.
okay, well, you're being honest. That's good.
Yeah.
And so it took me probably 2 years of negotiations with ICE, and we definitely had some problems. I mean, my client had destroyed like 200 I-9s mistakenly. They were terminated employees, and they didn't realize they needed to keep them, which there are some rules about keeping terminated employees' I-9s. But I was very proud that we were able to resolve it for $495,000,
Hmm.
uh, which is still a huge chunk of change. And they didn't need a payment plan. I mean, they'd like, where do we write the check? And they even called me, go, we want to write the check before the end of the year, because we have for our bookkeeping purposes. I'm like, oh, I'm sure the government will speed up the process to get your 495,000. So that was, it was down a little over 1/3. But
End up
that's,
getting a percentage or something of how much you save as a
yeah,
contract.
one of my staff members says, you ought to start working on these things on a percent when you save that much money. So
Yeah.
I've had some where I've saved over maybe 2/3,
Yeah.
50%. I mean, sometimes what you find is ICE isn't perfect. They make mistakes in their own audit.
Hmm.
And I had an audit out of Atlanta, and they tried about, I think it's 40,000. And they said, you kept all these people who were undocumented, and you knew it. And I'm like, how the hell do they know it? And they go, oh, we gave them a notice of suspect documents, and they ignored it. Again, they didn't hire me at the time. And we were able to prove that you never served any notice of suspect documents. And I'm like, they go, well, we think we have it around here somewhere. I'm like, well, if you do, prove, provide
Yeah.
it. The next day they just said, you know what, we can't find it. We'll just take all those allegations out. So we went
Yeah.
from 40,000 to 14,000, overnight. Sometimes they lose the I-9s. Like, nope, we provided you the I-9s, and they make a mistake in that they give you a receipt, but they don't tell you how many I-9s they got most of the time.
Yeah.
You can use it to your advantage because you can say, well, I can tell you we gave them to you. You don't have any idea how many we gave.
Yeah.
Uh, and again, another case out of Atlanta, I knocked about $50,000 off. It was $100,000 case. So, it was good.